Who sold the black people to America?
Oh, that's what you on right now?
I'm just asking.
Girl, I'm done with that.
Black people sold their people to Americans.
Now, I came across an insightful quote attributed to the Dalai Lama, which reads, "The reality today is that we are all interdependent and have to coexist on this small planet. Therefore, the only sensible and intelligent way of resolving differences and clashes of interest, whether between individuals or nations, is through dialogue." And I couldn't agree more. But today we're going to be getting into the idea of the dark side of dialogue. When is it time to walk away from the table of discussion? When is it time to set the table for discussion at all? When is it time to shut down a malignant narrative? And when is it time to protect your own narrative? And perhaps most importantly, when is it time to not only protect a narrative, but also make it painfully clear that there are those who pretend to be a racial and cultural representative of you, but only for the purposes of misrepresenting your narrative in order to dismantle the momentum of a political agenda? So let's get into it. But before we do, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Now, Black American society, aka the descendants of those who were enslaved in the United States, are no strangers to being left out of the conversation if we were to gauge it through a historical lens. We already know that the earliest drafts of the United States Constitution did not consider foundational Black Americans when they initially said that all men were created equal. And we already are given a gist of the American exclusionary sentiment through the words of Sojourner Truth, when she gave her speech in 1851 that has been since titled, "Ain't I a Woman?" This was her response to somehow being excluded from the benefits that had been set aside for women, and that apparently she was not a woman since the conversation regarding these women's benefits did not deem her kind worthy of being included in the dialogue. But now in current times, there seem to be endless displays of cross-cultural and political dialogue taking place in spaces and discussions that once excluded the input of the Black American. Black Americans that, aside from being disenfranchised, arguably were more conservative than they were liberal on the eve of the Civil Rights Movement, especially considering how so much of Southern Black American society was heavily influenced by the church as well as biblical scripture. Martin Luther King was reportedly a registered Republican. And we have myriad examples of how he spoke on behalf of Black American society as a voice amongst those who had once been left out of the dialogue for centuries. But what is to be made of it when the current stereotype being attributed to modern Black Republicans and or conservatives is antagonizing speech directed toward Black American society?
And you dumb Negroes are capitulating white supremacy, and you try to act like white supremacy is a big deal to you, but you're furthering the messaging and the theology of white supremacy.
Is it a growing perception that antagonizing speech is the conservative idea of civil discourse, just to accuse the opposition of not wanting to engage in civil dialogue when they choose to walk away from being insulted and ultimately gaslighted in the aftermath?
You dumb Negroes.
Now, self-identified libertarian and talk show host Bill Maher went on the Club Random podcast with Billy Corgan and gave his beliefs as to how people on the left behave when it comes to open discourse versus people on the right.
You know, the right-wingers, say what you want about them, but they talk to you. They're not into this leftist think. The left really has much more of a, I don't talk to you, I don't want to deal with you, you're deplorable, I can't break bread with you.
Yeah.
That attitude, and like all the right-wingers, they don't have that attitude.
Now, there may be some truth to this, given the fact that when Ice Cube came up with a plan for Black America, both the Democrats and the Republicans expressed their interest in speaking with him in further detail. But the difference was that the Democrats put it on the back burner to resume talks at a future date undetermined, while the Republicans wanted an immediate sit down to discuss his ideas in further detail.
I came up with the contract with Black America, and I didn't run to go work with any campaign. Both campaigns contacted me. both campaigns wanted to talk to me about the contract with Black America. One campaign said, we love what you have, but let's really dig into it after the election. And one campaign said, we love what you have. Do you mind talking to us about it? And that's what I did. So I didn't run to nobody. And so that was real misleading to me.
Well, I didn't say you ran to anybody. I said that you had taken a pivot.
Well, you said I ran over to the Trump team instead of the Biden team. That's just not true.
Well, but you are working with the Trump team instead of the Biden team, and people are giving you heat for it. What do you say to them?
Pay attention to how Anthony Cuomo, who is a Democrat, deflects the focus from himself by saying people are giving him heat for talking to Trump, when he may very well be one of the main ones bringing the heat to Ice Cube's door for talking to Trump.
Well, but you are working with the Trump team instead of the Biden team, and people are giving you heat for it. What do you say to them?
Well, I'm willing to work with both teams, but I'm just working with whoever is willing to work with me. So the Trump campaign came to me and asked me to explain to them some of the contract with Black America. That's what I did. I'm not playing no more of these games, these political games. We're not part of a team. We have very broad problems, especially the wealth gap in this country when it comes to Black Americans. So I'm going to whoever's in power and I'm gonna speak to them about our problems specifically. I'm not going there talking about minorities. I'm not going there talking about people of color or diversity or none of that stuff. I'm going there for Black Americans, the ones who are the descendants of slaves. And that's what I'm going to talk to anybody who's in power with that. So if anybody got a problem with that, it seems like a personal problem.
Well, here's the problem, and it is very personal, as you know, for a lot of people of color, because they'll say, well, why would you pick Trump when he says there's no such thing as systemic inequality? Say again?
I'm not picking nobody. He's the president.
So it seems that if I had to intuit the Republican perspective, Republicans view the Democrats as individuals who would rather live in an echo chamber rather than have civil dialogue, and ultimately shaming anyone from speaking with the opposition out of fear that the Republican position may expose the fallacies in the left-leaning disposition. Whereas if I had to intuit the Democratic Party's perspective, it seems that they are already convinced that these types of discussions will be a waste of time, considering that the ultimate conclusion of not seeing eye to eye is inherent in the Republicans' rhetoric that has already been documented. So one says that the other doesn't want to talk, while the other says that all they want to do is waste time with no intention of reaching an amicable conclusion, which may be true of the overarching Republican sentiment, but it's also true that Patrick Moynihan was a Democrat, and this Democrat was the one who suggested to a Republican president, Richard Nixon, that they simply ignore the issues of racial strife in America, coined the benign neglect policy.
Well, here's the problem, and it is very personal, as you know, for a lot of people of color, because they'll say, well, why would you pick Trump when he says there's no such thing as systemic inequality?
So it's quite rich that a Democrat, Anthony Cuomo, would insinuate that Ice Cube is wasting his time talking to Republican Donald Trump for being loyal to the policy authored by Democrats, the benign neglect policy. Talk about irony. All that this goes to show is that Democrat and Republican are certainly two wings on the same bird. Each have within themselves the exact same flaws as what they are accusing the other of having. So just because one side is more willing to engage in discourse does not imply that they are doing it in good faith. In fact, when the overall mission is to discredit the opposition, the best method is to talk to them. So that way you can hear all of their ideas only for the purposes of coming up with the best response to destroy their ideas or dissuade anyone from being influenced by these ideas. So just because you see that conservatives are disproportionately the ones holding public discussions where they tell you to change their mind, does not mean that they have come to have their minds changed. In fact, while I find that most conservative views resonate with my own views as a conservative, In my observation, the most reoccurring moments of disingenuous rhetoric arises when conservatives are confronted with matters concerning racial strife and the legacy of slavery and black disenfranchisement in the United States. Many of the Democrats will at least recognize or acknowledge all of it, but only to ultimately redirect the energy to focus on the advancement of a buffer class for the purposes of securing a new voting bloc consisting of immigrants and individuals with alternative lifestyles. But hey, at least they recognized your issues. They pat themselves on the back for having done so, as DACA takes center stage and the descendants of freedmen find themselves disappeared into an all-inclusive category called people of color. But hey, at least they recognized your issues.
Who sold the black people to America?
Oh, that's what you on right now?
I'm just asking.
Girl, I'm done with that.
Black people sold their people to Americans.
But what is it about the so-called black conservative that makes this response seemingly more commonplace? Here, we begin our analysis. Now, I hear a lot of complaints about people taking only a clip of a larger conversation and running with it. You know, they complain about being characterized by a brief soundbite, especially in matters where the masses are coming for their heads, so to speak. But what's even more confusing is when the person who was doing the complaining is also the very person who uploaded the problematic soundbite. You see, they uploaded it for a reason, and that reason was more than likely in an effort to communicate a message to their base, or manufacture perception in a way that they simply did not anticipate the level of blowback that they received in the aftermath of uploading it. And some probably do it with the sole intention of triggering the audience for the purposes of creating controversy in order to solicit attention, because after all, attention is, by and large, becoming a coveted currency for people attempting to raise their stock in the competitive market of personalities and narratives found in the realm of social media. And here we have such a clip on display. This clip of a content creator, from what I gather, has conservative leanings, which is probably why the algorithm saw fit to include it in my video feed, considering that I also have conservative leanings. They probably thought that this would be something that would be right up my alley, that I should enjoy. But lo and behold, this video was yet another example of how half-truth propaganda gives black conservatives a bad rap. Now, I assume that this individual identifies as black, considering the way that she chose to title her video. Fellow black girl calls me slur after simple question. So we'll go with the assumption that she considers herself a fellow black girl.
Well, I think the people who don't like America have like ancestors who were brought here and forced to work, you know, and forced to do a lot of shit they didn't want to. Gay people just happen to exist.
Like black people?
Yeah, like black people.
Who sold the black people to America?
Oh, that's what you on right now?
I'm just asking.
Girl, I'm done with that.
No. Why? Do I sound smart?
I told you about oppressed people and the American flag, and then you turn around and talk about
I can't hear you.
the black people.
And what's the answer? Black people sold their people to Americans. A coon. I'm a coon now because she called me a coon.
Wow, that's racist.
I'm darker than her though. That usually doesn't happen.
Cute, isn't it? But this has become the pervading stereotype of black conservatives seeking to engage in civil discourse. And rather than destroy her talking points like I'm about to do, the participant decides that it's beneath her to dignify this level of propaganda with a response. And then the so-called conservative person will use this as evidence that the stereotype is true, that people on the left side of the aisle are unwilling to participate in civil dialogue. And then they'll accuse you of this before ever even knowing whether or not you stand on the left or the right. Because each side of the aisle attributes left or right by whether or not the opponent agrees with them. You see, a black person protesting is stereotyped as left, whereas a white person exercising stand your ground laws is stereotyped as right. And each side uses this label as their dog whistle to their audience that you are to be viewed as the ideological enemy. So never mind that you're insulting people and using propaganda to misrepresent the facts and outright lie. No, if you walk away, the problem is you. Now, I noticed that the lady asked her whether she was a Republican, to which she responded, "Oh, do I sound smart?"
No. Why? Do I sound smart?
No, she asked you that because to her, you sound white. Which goes to show that either she is not connected to the black community but calls herself black in order to get into black spaces, or is connected to the black community and wants to break into the mainstream by showing that she can be used as a token in order to say what white conservatives might get in trouble for saying. Nick Fuentes going in on Jason Whitlock comes to mind.
You are a token. Hey, Jason, you're a token. You are in conservative media as a black guy that can confer upon white people the dignity of not being called a racist for having their views. Because I didn't have the privilege of being born black, I was born white, so there's a limit on what I can say.
Now, as for the way that she chose to title the video, "Black Girl Calls Me Slur," interesting that she felt the need to include the race of the person in the title.
To Americans. A coon. I'm a coon now because she called me a coon.
But after watching the video, I've come to the conclusion that she does not know the difference between being called a slur and someone saying that you sound like a slur. One is attributed to your character and the other is attributed to your words.
She called me a coon.
But I can certainly say that you sounded like a Karen when you lied and said that she called you a slur. And these minor details should be a no-brainer for so-called conservatives, these same so-called conservatives who were quick to defend Charlie Kirk for saying that, the thing about the brain processing power.
You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously.
They said, oh, he never said that black women didn't have the brain processing power to be taken really seriously. No, he just named 4 women who happened to be black. Well, by that same metric, know the difference between being called a duck and someone saying that you quack like a duck. But since she walked away from what she knew was going to be a bad faith discussion where you controlled the narrative and the editing of the video for the purposes of entertaining your base, I believe it was Doc Holliday who said it best.
I'm your huckleberry.
So let's expose the lies of this fake conservative. Now, why do I say fake? Because anytime you intentionally misrepresent the history for the sake of manipulating the perception of our ancestors' history in this nation, fake is the best I can do without going too low below the belt, though it may be deserving.
Who sold the black people to America? Black people sold their people to Americans.
How does that account for Solomon Northup, who was drugged and kidnapped in Washington, D.C., and then sold into slavery down south? All took place on American soil. Remember 12 Years a Slave? And what about Richard Bell's Stolen, where he details the true story of 5 boys who were kidnapped in the North and sold into slavery down south? What about the thousands and thousands of others who were kidnapped right on this soil in America, in a practice that lasted until the Civil War? You think we don't know our history? Now, you may be telling someone else's history, but it ain't ours, which makes me question that if she is black at all, where is her black lineage tied to? What is her black lineage tied to that makes her so quick to misrepresent the full history of American slavery so as to absolve white Americans who enslaved free Americans, which is believed to have been the majority case in the United States? So we can already see that you're a liar, but as for the idea of blacks selling their people,
black people sold their people to Americans.
You do know that black is not a monolith, right? But for some apparent reason, differentiation is inconvenient when nuance gets in the way of agenda. But this is how black people have historically determined the disposition of the mulatto. And I'm not sure whether or not she is a mulatto, but she sure appears to be. See, when confronted with the idea of the possibility of mixed race individuals being used to infiltrate and disrupt black institutions, black folks would gauge the mind through how they spoke. Yeah, see, they might be black on paper, but what color is their mind? In her rhetoric, considering all black people as one big Negro, I mean, you tell me what color her mind is. Now, does she also believe that the Holocaust was a case of white people doing that to their own people as well? See, I remember Whoopi Goldberg was suspended for suggesting that idea. But somehow when it comes to black people, there are no tribes, no nations, no war, no prisoners of war, just black on black crime. And white folks are victims of an enterprise that was started by self-hating Negroes.
Black people sold their people.
But still, that does not account for Pope Nicholas V's issuance of the papal bull Dum Diversas in 1452, which granted Portugal the right to attack and enslave non-Christians in Africa. Now, where is the black hand in that? There is none. But she would have you believe that black people were just so bored that they called up America and asked them if they were interested in purchasing prime Negro. No, the truth was that just like in America, they kidnap and take you by force. But it just so happened that many of the African coastal tribes knew how to fight pretty successfully and defend themselves well. So the Europeans had to find another way to secure their cargo without getting their heads knocked off in the process. So they decided to make deals with rival tribes in exchange for goods and supplies for slaves and their POWs. But she would rather tell a lie and make it seem like Uncle Kunta sold Brother Babatunde for a fly swatter. No. Just because they have the same skin complexion does not mean that they are the same people. But what I find even more interesting is when she said this.
I just wish that Charlie could speak for himself. I wish that he could speak for himself.
Now, I do believe that Charlie Kirk spoke for himself in so many words, and he disagrees with her talking points regarding white American slave masters and black African slave sellers, as exposed in this clip here.
How is it the government's fault of why dads aren't around?
I mean, we could get into the whole, like, the rhetoric of crack babies and crack drug dealers.
So, but isn't it a decision to take drugs?
Oh, no, 100%.
So, and it's a decision to commit crimes.
Yes.
Okay, so the government didn't do that to them. People decided to take drugs.
See, he blames black Americans for making the choice to buy, sell, and smoke crack, despite whether or not the government played a major role in supplying those drugs. You shouldn't have made that choice. So aside from her willful ignorance about the countless cases of white American kidnapping and enslaving free black people on America, no one told them to make the choice to go and buy slaves, even if it was Black Jesus who was doing the selling. Charlie Kirk, by his own logic, would tell you to take responsibility for your own choices. Which means that American slavery is America's fault, just like it's your fault for choosing to be disingenuous about American history and for turning into a Karen when your words are characterized as sounding like the words that are spoken from a black person who was a slave master's mouthpiece. And with that being said, I believe that's checkmate. So guys, dialogue is extremely important for development, but regardless of which side of the political aisle you choose to lead towards, be it the left or be it the right, there should be no expectation of being entertained by an audience of willful participants when dialogue is the Trojan horse for antagonism and deception.
You can run, but you can't hide.